Hey, good people. So I recently did a fun Q&A with my good friend Winston over on his channel, which I'll link to there. But the first question was on the axial aspect. And since my last video, I've been getting a bunch of questions on what is the axial aspect. And in that Q&A, I think I summarized it pretty well. And so I'm going to switch over to myself explaining it. And I wanted to put this on my channel as well. And then I'm going to come back and I want to add a little bit more to it. So uh, over to me and then back to me.
This is from our mutual acquaintance, friend, colleague, Andres. Talk about the sense of solidity manifesting as a property of the axial aspect of perception. And then there's a second part of the question, but maybe we can address that.
Okay, love it, love it, love it. Yeah, so the axial aspect is this term that I'm coining, and we'll see if it catches on or not. But it's to refer to essentially the aspect of experience that one has yet to see the emptiness of and appears to be one's perceived ground of being at that time. And it's very domineering, but people don't have a lot of sensory clarity on it. And so maybe it's hard for them to distinguish or point out, and they can't locate it any particular which way, or maybe they can. And it's really that subject of being that is kind of everything in experience filters through or is perceived to be behind, and one's axial aspect. So I'm coming up with a new term for this because I want to help people find and relate to different parts of their experience independent of the specific content, because the content of the axial aspect can change. So one's perceived ground of being or essence of being or experience could be, for most people, it's this sense of like the small self, independent subject. But then it can move along and it can become this sense of like the witness or this sense of boundless awareness or something like that. Or it could move on to a sense of nothingness, or it could move on to just the sense of an experiencer. And it's solid in so much as the phenomenologically you aren't able to release it or dispel from. I mean, you might have temporary brief moments but we're talking most of the time, this just seems like your bedrock, your foundation of being. It's the part you can't peer through. It's not phenomenologically transparent to you yet, meaning you can't see through it. It doesn't seem like an emergent property of experience yet. It seems like, no, that's ground zero. So just another point on the solidity part. This thing can actually be, your axial aspect is so solid that you may not even understand its solidity. It may not be obvious. It's not solid in the sense of feeling a rock. It can be, it's a part of experience that's so domineering that it's like a fish in water. You can even forget that it seems like it's just always the case. So, when people talk about they're always aware of awareness, or they have never lost touch with that sort of that special ultimate thing or whatever, or non-thing. So it's solid in that way, although many people might think it's not solid. If they were to relate to that part of their being, they want to make something special out of it. Often this is the part of their experience they're saying is beyond all concepts and the world of form and this stuff. And I would argue they're saying that because they don't have a lot of sensory clarity on what that part is yet, and they haven't really integrated it into the rest of the stuff, so they're making something special out of it. Do you kind of get the gist? Is that clear to you? Does that make
That's clear to me, and I think if people are relatively familiar with the territory we're talking about, at least in a broad way, it'll also be, it'll make sense to folks in the audience, but maybe I'll just restate it. It's that aspect of perception. I've heard in some contemporary teachers. I'm not sure if they're translating a technical Tibetan term here. If they are, I don't remember what it is. The basis of operation. It's kind of like the sense of out of which you are, filtering, interpreting, acting from in your experience.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I'm giving it this ambiguous name so that people aren't always getting lost in, because if you call it like, your primordial self or essence, and then it's making it so special, and people can actually be referring to different things there. And if you want to say, no, it's this special awareness thing or something like that, there are some problems that come up, and there's like a lack of clarity. So I'm kind of trying to ground it in, oh no, it's relevant and relative to the other aspects of our experience, including your sense of the focused attention and peripheral awareness, and then this amodal perception. Yeah.
Are you saying, Roger, that we are not the absolute witness beyond space and time that is simultaneously present in every phenomenon?
I may just be, yes. Don't crucify me for it.
Are you saying that that's merely a stage of development along, a perceptual path of clarity? My goodness.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, is I want to help people understand, have tools for better making sense of their experience, and be able to understand where other people are coming from, and introducing a term here that helps make sense of why people might speak in a certain way, and how you could relate that to your experience. And if you've gone through that, or you skipped it, or you're before or after, or any of these which ways.
Yeah, I think that's clear for folks. And if it's not, leave a comment. tell us if we're not clear, because we're just talking to each other here.
It's gonna happen. Yep.
Okay, so that was me describing the axial aspect, and hopefully it was clear. And I think it's a helpful term to introduce into these spaces, into the collective lexicon, making sense of our phenomenology, stages of awakening and such, because most teachers or people only speak from their current level of realization. And so there's a lot of confusion. They don't speak across perspectives and gaining meta perspectives and doing the necessary theory of mind to understand where people are coming from and why we fall on different conclusions and why we talk in these different ways. So I think that's very important, and a lot of people I see just kind of get locked into their position. So I'm trying to introduce a new term to bridge gaps and help us share and make sense of our ongoing evolving experiences there. Just a few more points on the axial aspect. So as you can see via this diagram, it is on a spectrum of phenomenological richness and sense of integrated information. So how much complex content is there in that aspect of experience, with the axial aspect actually having ridiculously high levels of phenomenological richness, but very, very minimal informational content. And so that's why it can be hard to talk about. And it's kind of perceived in the same way, almost in the same way as what's in the amodal range, that content that is very, very minimal phenomenological content that you can't really decipher as having any particular obvious 3D shapes, colors, form in that way. It's kind of perceived as like just information, and the amodal content is that which is thought of as the part that the mind fills in the blank, that you don't directly perceive. And people want to say is what's filled in the blank. So it's kind of the imaginary stuff. As the axial aspect is the part that people want to say is no, the most real. It's like the most real thing. Like I am the most real thing, or this awareness is the most real thing, or sense of I am, or whatever it might be, or nibbana if they're making that, kind of a ground out of the groundless thing. So in that way, kind of the axial aspect and amodal perception are sort of perceived in a similar way, even though they exist at opposite ends of a spectrum. And there's a quite a radical insight to get that there's no difference between the so-called imaginary and the real. There's just a continuation here of phenomenological richness, and they all exist in the same way. And then the other point I wanted to add is that eventually, if you take your journey far enough, one loses an axial aspect. There is no central revolving primordial point or thing or no thing which is in relation to everything else or is filtered from everything else. Then you get that full integration and immersion between the relative and the absolute, and samsara is nirvana, and form is emptiness. And one has to be quite honest with oneself whether that is really the genuine case of their experience. One may understand those words, hear those words, like those words, but really their experience is a matter of like flipping between the two, or axial aspect and then they kind of loosening it or moving it. But there's still, if you're being real, there's still a center there, or a perceived ground zero. So just a little bit more. Hope this is helpful. And if you would like to make this less theoretical and more tangible and locate this stuff in your experience, I actually have guided meditations on this very specific teaching, trying to help people find really what in their experience these different aspects, different phases of their consciousness, and ground this more in your practice. That's some guided meditations on my Patreon, where I release weekly, novel, exciting, all kinds of meditations every week. Yes. And I just recently put out a series I'm calling Meditative Workouts, which are specifically more effortful, arduous, like working out for your brain type meditations that a lot of people enjoy. They find them fun, and it's kind of to strengthen important cognitive faculties that are going to aid in your awakening and to avoid complacency. There's a lot of stalling, but at the same time there are also meditations that are more free-flowing, less doing, more just kind of being, and there's a big variety there. So the best of both worlds, and finding the middle way and all that good stuff. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.